Coastal California bar. Late night, music blaring. A woman sat in the corner, leather jacket, quietly drinking coffee. A drunk man stumbled into her, sneered. "You don't greet men?" She spoke softly. "Sorry, I don't like noise." He laughed mockingly, slapped her hard. The coffee cup shattered. The music stopped. She looked up, eyes cold as steel, voice calm. "I tried to avoid violence." One movement later, the man collapsed onto the table, and when an ID card fell from her pocket, someone whispered in horror, "Oh my God, she's Navy SEAL?" The entire bar went completely silent. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Dalton, 35 years old, former Navy SEAL, discharged after an explosion in Yemen, now working as a civilian ship repair technician. Evan Brooks, 38 years old, bar owner, former Marine, lost teammates in the same war zone where Sarah had served. Mark Taylor, 40 years old, NCIS special agent, Sarah's old friend, the man who'd helped her leave the military. Sarah had been the first female SEAL deployed to actual combat operations. They called her Specter, the ghost of missions where no enemies survived. But the explosion in Yemen 3 years ago changed everything. She was severely injured. Her teammates died. She chose to disappear, to live quietly. She worked at the shipyard, always wore a baseball cap to hide her scars, spoke little. No one knew her real identity. She'd spent 3 years rebuilding herself, learning to be normal, learning to be invisible. The work was simple, mechanical, honest. No one shot at her. No one died because of her decisions. She liked it that way. That evening after her shift, she went to Evan's bar, a place she occasionally visited, sitting alone in the corner, never talking, just drinking coffee. She didn't drink alcohol anymore. Too many memories came with it. The bar was busy, music loud, people laughing, living normal lives. Sarah watched them, wondering what that felt like, to be unburdened by the past. A group of drunk customers entered, including some reserve soldiers, young, arrogant, looking for trouble. They noticed Sarah, sitting alone, quiet, an easy target. "Hey, beautiful, why no smile?" one called out. Sarah didn't respond, just looked down at her coffee. Another approached, stood too close. "You deaf or something? I'd like to be left alone, please." "Oh, she speaks, and so polite." He grabbed her arm. "Come on, have a drink with us." Sarah pulled her arm away, firmly but not aggressively. "No, thank you." The man's face reddened. His friends laughed. His ego was bruised. "Too good for us? Think you're special?" Evan noticed the situation, started walking over. "Guys, leave her alone." But the drunk man was already committed, had to save face. "She needs to learn some manners." He raised his hand, slapped Sarah across the face. The sound cracked through the bar. The music seemed to stop. Everyone turned. Sarah's head snapped to the side. Coffee spilled. The cup fell, shattered on the floor. For a moment, she didn't move, just sat there, processing. Then slowly she stood, turned to face him. Her eyes were different now, cold, calculating, dangerous. "I tried to avoid this," she said quietly. The man laughed, threw a punch, telegraphed, sloppy, predictable. Sarah moved. 3 movements, precise, efficient, devastating. She deflected his punch, struck his elbow, swept his legs, controlled his fall so he wouldn't hit his head. 3 seconds. He was unconscious on the table. His friends started to move. Sarah's voice stopped them. "Don't." They froze. Something in her tone, in her posture, made them understand. They were outmatched. Evan rushed over. "Sarah, are you okay?" She nodded, adjusted her jacket. Her wallet had fallen during the confrontation. One of the customers picked it up, handed it to her, but not before seeing what was inside. An old military ID card. "Navy SEAL Team 5, LT CDR, S. Dalton." The customer's eyes widened. "Ma'am, you're a SEAL?" The word spread through the bar like wildfire. Whispers, stares, phones coming out. Sarah took her wallet. Was. Past tense. She placed money on the bar, more than enough to cover damages. Started to leave. Evan called after her. Sarah, wait. You don't have to go. She stopped at the door. Didn't turn around. Yes, I do. This is why I left. Why I stayed hidden. Because violence follows me. You defended yourself. He assaulted you. Doesn't matter. Tomorrow everyone will know. The quiet ship mechanic is actually a killer. You're not a killer. You're a hero. Sarah finally looked back. Sad smile. Heroes don't exist, Evan. Just people trying to survive. She walked out, into the night, knowing her peaceful life was over. Behind her, the bar remained silent, people processing what they'd witnessed. The quiet woman who sat alone, who never caused trouble, was one of the most dangerous people in the world. Evan looked at the unconscious man, then at the door where Sarah had left. He'd served in the Marines. Recognized that look in her eyes. The look of someone who'd seen too much, done too much, could never forget. He picked up the phone, called Mark Taylor. We have a situation. Sarah's cover is blown. A customer later recalled, she didn't yell, didn't threaten, just said, was a seal. Her voice was cold, made the whole bar afraid to breathe. The next day, Mark Taylor appeared at the shipyard. Sarah, I know you don't want to be involved, but there's something you need to hear. I'm not in the military anymore, Mark. This isn't about the military. It's about your people. He showed her a photograph. Chief Mason, her old teammate, supposedly killed in Yemen, now suspected of being involved in weapons trafficking. Sarah went pale. That's impossible. Mason wouldn't betray us. You once said that about your commanding officer, too. Don't bring that up. But it was too late. The damage was done. The video from the bar had already gone viral. Former female SEAL knocks out veteran in bar fight. Alongside the clip, a caption. Female SEAL from failed Yemen mission resurfaces. The media descended. Reporters at her apartment, at the shipyard, asking questions, demanding interviews. Sarah tried to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Her face was everywhere. Her story twisted, sensationalized. Evan helped her escape through the back of his bar. I know that look. You've seen hell. I don't want to go back. Sometimes hell doesn't give us a choice. Sarah holed up in a motel, turned off her phone, tried to figure out what to do next. But Mark called from a different number. She answered without thinking. Sarah, Mason has been kidnapped. You're the only person he trusts. She was silent. Long silence. Then, send me the coordinates. Within an hour, she was geared up. Old habits returning, muscle memory taking over. Mark provided weapons, tactical vest, communications equipment. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. They drove to the location, an abandoned warehouse district in Long Beach. Dangerous, isolated, perfect for what they were planning. Sarah moved differently now. The quiet mechanic was gone. The operator had returned. She swept the perimeter, identified entry points, assessed threats. All automatic, all instinctive. 2 guards outside, probably more inside. We go quiet. Mark nodded, followed her lead. She'd done this hundreds of times. He trusted her completely. They neutralized the exterior guards. Non-lethal. Sarah didn't want to kill unless absolutely necessary. Inside the warehouse, they found Mason. Beaten, bloody, but alive. Sarah cut his restraints. Can you walk? Mason looked up. Recognition. Relief. Specter? They told me you were dead. I was. For a while. Come on, we're leaving. But Mason grabbed her arm. Sarah, wait. It wasn't me. It's Commander Graves. He's selling SEAL intel to arms dealers. Sarah froze. Graves. The man who'd trained her. Who'd been like a father. That's not possible. It's true. He's been doing it for years. Financing his retirement. Before Sarah could respond, gunfire erupted. They were surrounded. Mark returned fire. We need to move. Sarah grabbed Mason, half-carried him toward an exit, bullets ricocheting, chaos everywhere. Her training kicked in. She moved through the warehouse like a ghost, using cover, returning fire with precision. Every shot counted. She got Mason to safety, handed him to Mark. Get him out, I'm going back. Sarah, you can't. Graves is in there. This ends now. She moved back into the warehouse, methodical, efficient, taking out hostile targets, non-lethal when possible, lethal when necessary. She found Graves in the back office, calm, waiting, like he knew she'd come. I taught you how to shoot, Dalton. Now you point a gun at me? You taught me loyalty to teammates, not to traitors. I did this for my country. You ran because you were scared. No, I left because I realized sometimes the country needs to be saved from the people claiming to serve it. They stared at each other. Years of history, training, trust, all shattered. Graves moved first, drew his weapon. Sarah was faster. Single shot, center mass. Graves fell. Sarah lowered her weapon, hands shaking. Mark appeared, put a hand on her shoulder. He deserved it. You just saved hundreds of lives. No one else should have to die. They left the warehouse. Police and federal agents arriving. Mark handled the explanations. Sarah just sat in the car, numb. Later at NCIS headquarters, senior officers reviewed the footage. Security cameras had captured everything. She acted outside authority, one said. Mark responded. She acted with honor. The debate continued, but the video had leaked. Public opinion was forming. People called her the Silent Seal, a hero without rank. Sarah didn't care. She just wanted it to be over, to disappear again. But she knew that was impossible now. Her face was known, her story told, her past revealed. There was no going back to the quiet life. She'd have to find a new way forward, a way to live with who she was, what she'd done, what she'd become. Real person marker. She left in an old brown jacket, didn't say a word, just placed her Navy ring on the workbench. We understood. She was going back to do what she was born to do. The painful truth exposed, and the dismissed woman becomes the object of an entire force's respect. The NCIS investigation revealed everything. Commander Graves had been selling classified SEAL information for 5 years. Mission details, operator identities, tactical procedures. Dozens of operations had been compromised, teams ambushed, good people killed, and Sarah had been the one to stop it, to end the betrayal. But public reaction was mixed. Some called her a hero. Others questioned why she'd left the military in the first place. The media dug into her past, the Yemen mission, the explosion, the classified details. What they found changed the narrative. Sarah hadn't left because of cowardice. She'd left because she'd been ordered to abandon her team, to prioritize the mission over lives. She'd refused, went back for them, saved 3, lost 5, including her best friend. The military had wanted to court-martial her. Mark had helped negotiate her discharge instead. Honorable, quiet, forgotten. But now the truth was out. The hero who'd been erased. The operator who'd been dismissed. Social media exploded. The Silent Seal trended worldwide. People shared her story, demanded recognition, called for justice. Sarah hated all of it. The attention, the praise, the scrutiny. She just wanted peace. Evan found her at the beach, sitting alone, watching the waves. You can't hide from this. I'm not hiding, I'm just tired. The world wants to know you. The world doesn't need to know me. They need to know that good people died, and that I couldn't save them. Evan sat beside her. You saved 3. That counts. Not as much as the 5 I lost. They sat in silence, understanding. Both veterans, both haunted. After a while, Evan spoke. There's something else you should know. The families of the operators' graves compromised. They want to meet you, to thank you. Sarah shook her head. I don't deserve their thanks. Maybe not, but they need to give it. Let them. The meeting was arranged. A private room at a veterans hall. 20 families, men, women, children, all affected by Graves's betrayal. Sarah stood before them, uncomfortable, uncertain. A woman approached. "You're Lieutenant Commander Dalton?" "Just Sarah. I'm not military anymore." "My husband was. Staff Sergeant Mike Chen. He died in an ambush last year. An ambush that Graves made possible." Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be sorry. Be proud. Because you stopped it. You made sure no more families suffer like we did." Another man stepped forward, older, gray hair. "My son was Petty Officer James Rodriguez, SEAL Team 3, killed in Afghanistan. Graves sold the mission details." Sarah remembered that operation, the investigation, the questions no one could answer. "I'm so sorry. We thought it was just bad luck, bad intelligence. We never knew someone betrayed them." His voice broke. "You gave us answers. You gave us justice." A younger woman approached, holding a folded flag. "This was my brother's, Lieutenant Marcus Webb. He was 28, had a daughter he never got to meet." She held out the flag to Sarah. "He would have wanted you to have this. You finished what he couldn't." Sarah's hands trembled as she accepted it. The weight of it, the meaning. "I can't take this." "You have to, because you're still fighting. For all of them." Others came forward, shaking her hand, hugging her, thanking her, crying. Sarah stood there, accepting their gratitude, even though she felt she didn't deserve it. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, handed her a drawing, a stick figure with a cape. "That's you. My daddy said you were a superhero." Sarah knelt down. "I'm not a superhero, sweetie. I'm just a person who tries to help. That's what superheroes do." Sarah smiled, for the first time in days, maybe in years. "Then I guess we're all superheroes, when we help each other." The media caught wind of the meeting, cameras outside, reporters shouting questions. Sarah ignored them, but one video got through. The little girl handing her the drawing, Sarah kneeling, smiling, human. That video changed everything. Millions of views, thousands of comments. People seeing her not as a weapon, but as a person who'd sacrificed, who'd suffered, who'd kept going despite everything. The Navy took notice, called a press conference, announced they were reinstating Sarah's honors, awarding her the Navy Cross for her actions in Yemen and against Graves. Sarah was invited to attend. She almost refused, but Mark convinced her. "You owe it to the 5 who didn't come home. Accept it for them." So she went, wore her dress uniform for the first time in 3 years, stood on stage, accepted the medal. When asked to speak, she kept it brief. "I don't accept this for myself. I accept it for Chief Mason, for Petty Officer Chen, for all the operators who trusted their leaders, who deserved better, who deserved to come home." Her voice cracked. "And I promise to honor their memory by making sure future operators are protected, by making sure betrayal like Graves's never happens again." The audience rose, standing ovation. Sarah stood at attention, fighting tears, accepting recognition she'd never wanted, but understanding why it mattered. After the ceremony, senior SEAL commanders approached. "We'd like you to come back, training command, teaching the next generation." Sarah considered. "On one condition, I teach them more than tactics. I teach them judgment, ethics, when to question orders, when to prioritize people over mission." The commanders exchanged glances. That was dangerous territory, but they nodded. "Agreed." Sarah shook hands, sealing the deal, not going back to combat, but going back to service, in a different way. That night she returned to Evans Bar, the place where it had all started, where the drunk man had slapped her, where her cover had been blown. The bar was packed. Everyone wanted to see her, to meet the silent SEAL, but Evan had kept them away, reserved her corner, protected her space. She sat down, ordered coffee, just like before. People watched, but didn't approach, respecting her privacy, her preference for quiet. Evan brought the coffee personally. "You're back." "I'm back. For good. For now, I'm taking a teaching position, SEAL Training Command." "That's good. You'll be great at it." Sarah sipped her coffee, looked around the bar, at the people, the normalcy. You know what's funny? I spent 3 years trying to be invisible, to be normal, and now everyone knows who I am. Is that bad? I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. Evan smiled. I'll be here. They sat in comfortable silence. Two warriors, finding peace in unlikely places. If you believe true strength doesn't require noise, comment, I will live with kindness. From the woman slapped in a bar, to the person who made an entire special operations force bow their heads. 1 month later, Sarah began teaching at SEAL Training Command. Her class was different, not just physical training, but ethical training. You're learning to be weapons, she told her students, but weapons need to think, to judge, to question. She taught them about Yemen, about graves, about the cost of blind obedience. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't pulling the trigger, it's refusing to, knowing when the mission is wrong, when orders need to be questioned. Her students listened intently. This wasn't standard military doctrine, but it was real, honest, necessary. One student asked, Ma'am, how do you know when to disobey? Sarah thought carefully. When following orders means betraying your teammates, when the mission prioritizes politics over people, when your gut tells you something is fundamentally wrong. Won't that get us in trouble? Probably, but living with a clear conscience is worth it. The students respected her, not just for her skill, but for her integrity, for what she'd sacrificed to do what was right. Meanwhile, Evan's Bar became a gathering place for veterans, a safe space where people understood, where stories were shared, where healing happened. Sarah visited regularly, sometimes teaching informal self-defense classes, showing people how to protect themselves, emphasizing control over violence. Violence should always be the last option, she'd say, but when it's necessary, be efficient, be precise, end it quickly. She taught women especially, survivors of assault, domestic violence, people who needed to feel safe again. You're stronger than you think, she told them, not because of muscles, but because you survived, because you're here, because you're learning. One woman, a survivor of a violent relationship, cried during a session. I feel weak, broken. Sarah held her hand. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. How do you know? Because I've been there. Different trauma, same pain. And I'm still here, still fighting. You will be too. The program grew. Other veterans joined to help teach. Mark came regularly. Evan provided the space. They built a community, a family. The media continued covering Sarah's story, but less sensationally now, more respectfully, focusing on her work, her impact, her message. One news segment featured her teaching a class. The reporter asked, You've become a role model. How does that feel? Sarah shrugged. Uncomfortable. I'm just doing what needs doing. But you're inspiring thousands. Then I hope I'm inspiring them to help each other, not to see me as special, but to see themselves as capable. The segment went viral. To be your own hero trending. People sharing their own stories of overcoming, of standing up, of finding strength. Sarah watched from her apartment, amazed, humbled. This is bigger than me now, she told Mark over the phone. It always was. You just showed people it was possible. I didn't do anything special. That's exactly why it matters. You're proof that regular people can be extraordinary. Sarah thought about that, about the quiet mechanic she'd been, about the operator she'd become again, about the teacher she was now. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe the message was that anyone could step up, could make a difference, could change lives, even quietly, even without recognition, even when scared. If you respect those who serve without seeking spotlight, comment respect. The woman who didn't need noise, but left an echo louder than gunfire. 1 year later, Sarah opened a self-defense center, Project Silent, teaching women and men to protect themselves, not through aggression, but through confidence. Evan became her partner. Mark visited regularly to teach tactics. Together, they built something meaningful. At the grand opening, Sarah hung a small sign. You don't need to be loud to make the world listen, a student asked. Do you regret hitting that man in the bar? Sarah smiled. No, because sometimes silence needs to be defended. The center thrived. Students from all backgrounds, all learning, all growing, all discovering their own strength. Sarah taught them what the military had taught her and what she'd learned leaving it. That strength isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, ethical. Real power, she'd say, is knowing you can hurt someone and choosing not to until you have no choice, then ending it decisively. One evening, Sarah walked along the beach, sunset painting the sky red and gold. Evan walked beside her. The Navy called again. They want to give you another medal. Sarah shook her head. I don't need more medals. What do you need? This, peace, purpose, knowing I'm making a difference. You are. Every student you teach, every person you help, that's your legacy. Sarah looked at the ocean, at the vast expanse, at the endless horizon. I used to think my legacy was the missions, the operations, the enemies I stopped. And now I think it's the people I helped stand up, the confidence I helped them find, the fear I helped them overcome. They walked in comfortable silence, the sun setting, the day ending, a new one coming. Sarah reached into her pocket, pulled out her old SEAL ID card, the one that had fallen in the bar, that had changed everything. She looked at the younger version of herself, the operator, the weapon, the ghost. I'm not her anymore, she said quietly. Who are you now? Sarah smiled, held the card over the water, let it go, watched it flutter down, disappear into the waves. Someone who finally found herself. The card sank beneath the surface, carried away by the tide, a symbol released, a past honored but not held. Evan understood. Ready to head back? Yeah, I have a class tomorrow. Teaching a group of survivors? They're depending on me. They're lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have found them, found purpose again. They walked back toward the parking lot, toward the car, toward the life Sarah had built from the ruins of her old one. Behind them, the sun disappeared below the horizon, darkness coming, but also stars, light persisting even in night. Sarah drove home, to her small apartment, to her quiet life, to the peace she'd fought so hard to find. She thought about the bar, about the slap, about how one moment had changed everything, but she didn't regret it. Because it had led her here, to teaching, to helping, to making a real difference. Not as Specter, not as the ghost of missions past, but as Sarah, just Sarah. A woman who learned that the loudest impact comes from the quietest strength. And that was enough, more than enough. That was everything. If you believe courage still lives in everyday heroes, subscribe to the Veteran Story. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.